Hi, everybody. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast, all things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Season has wrapped up. We will share some highlights and take a look ahead for the Cubs in 2022, but also for the MLB Postseason kicking off tonight. Cubs ended the year Sunday with a 3-2 win and back-to-back wins in St. Louis. Cubs ending 71-91, fourth place in the National League Central, and the sixth worst record in Major League Baseball. This team started 21-21, got hot for a little bit, 42-33 after play on June 24. That was the day of the no-hitter in Los Angeles. Four Cubs pitchers keeping the Dodgers hitless, and then the season dovetailed from there. It was also about that time when the Cubs front office was saying that the team would be buying at the trade deadline. We know the opposite took place, the massive sell-off in 2 months with a roster full of guys that none of us knew at the beginning of the year. In the National League Central, Milwaukee leapfrogged Chicago late in June and never looked back. 95-67 to win the division. St. Louis with an incredible run in September. What was it, a 17 or a 19-game win streak they put together? They finished 90-72. They are in the postseason. Cincinnati, who I honestly thought was the best team this season in the National League Central, they finished third, 12 games back of Milwaukee. Cubs 24 games back. Pittsburgh, again, in the division cellar, 34 back. Frank Schwindel came on as Anthony Rizzo's replacement at first base for the Cubs. He won the National League Rookie of the Month honors in August, and he did it again in September. In his first 50 games as a Cub, Schwindel with 69 hits, including 30 extra base hits. Both Schwindel and Rizzo ended the year with a WAR of 1.7. Rizzo has the edge on some other offensive stat categories, but he also played most of the year, more than twice as many at-bats as Schwindel. And you got to think Schwindel is in the Cubs' plans for 2022. Also praise for Patrick Wisdom. He was a machine. 28 home runs. And Rafael Ortega came on in a big way, too, including that 3-home run game in Washington. I was there and saw that in person. That was really cool, but he kept things going, not to that degree, but he still made things interesting last couple months of the year. So you got to think those three guys are going to see big roles in 2022. Now, let's talk more about that. Free agency is going to be huge, perhaps more this year than ever before. Cubs have a lot of money after the salary dump at the trade deadline. And you got to think at least one more bat is coming to this roster. And the pitching staff needs a lot of work as well. First 4 months of the year, Cubs bullpen was solid. One of the best in the majors. A lot of pieces were moved in July, and then it was shaky after that. Meanwhile, the rotation was shaky throughout the entire season. You got to have a couple more starters, and you can never have too many arms in the bullpen. Wilson Contreras is the de facto captain of this team. You have to assume he'll be back behind the plate for the Cubs, but catcher depth is needed, and we saw that this year. Cubs went through, 6 or 7 guys behind the plate? Contreras was a workhorse, but he ended up missing some games late, undoubtedly due to being overworked. So we take a look at a very early look at next year's roster, and this is primarily using guys they already have. You've got Schwindel at first, Nick Madrigal, who they picked up at the trading deadline from the White Sox, at second base, Nico Horner at short, and Patrick Wisdom at third. That's not a bad infield, but you do have 3 wild cards. Mainly, can Nico stay healthy? He was not able to stay healthy in 2021, and I think that hurts the evaluation of him as well. The Cubs still don't really know exactly what they have in Nico Horner. And will Wisdom and Schwindel continue to get it done in year 2 with the big league club? Outfield is up for grabs. You got to assume Jason Hayward is still at right. He's still got another year or 2 left in that big contract. Perhaps another wild card if you keep Ortega in center, and I think left is open as well. So you got to think that they're going to solidify with at least one more outfielder, and I think they go after someone at shortstop too. I think it'll be Madrigal and someone else up the middle. Then you'll see Horner perhaps used in a platoon-type situation, and he can play other positions as well. Now, the pitching staff, we'll see Kyle Hendricks back as the ace. Who will be behind him? That's the big question. Alec Mills is somewhere in the rotation. Cubs are pretty high on Justin Steele, too. He had a solid September, but where is Adbert Alzolay? Is he a starter? Is he a long reliever? I started out big believer in him, and he looked pretty good the first few weeks of the year. Then he went into a long slump, was bumped back to the bullpen, and I liked him there. I thought he finished the season as a reliable, long reliever when the starters would get into trouble, and that happened on several occasions. There was Alzolay to the rescue, eating innings, keeping games manageable. So it's still to be determined where Keegan Thompson will fit into future plans. You got some other guys who they've been watching as well. So we'll see how that shakes out. Injuries added up for the Cubs this season. I mean, 162-game season is long. That's that way for every team. But the Cubs had multiple COVID outbreaks and just a myriad of injuries overall. In fact, the team set a record for most players used in one season. 69 players hit the field this year for the Cubs. That's not just a team record. That is a Major League Baseball record previously held by the 2019 Seattle Mariners. Cubs' previous franchise record was just 56 in 2013. And 44 of the players used this year by the Cubs were first-timers, making their Cubs debut. Up next for the Cubs, free agency after the World Series. But there's also the broader topic of the collective bargaining agreement between the owners and players union. We'll see what happens. I'm sure there will not be a massive stoppage like we saw in the mid-90s. That would kill the game, of course, and the game desperately needs all the help they can get. So I'm sure they will figure out a way, get the guys back on the field just in time for spring training 2022. This and that, our news and notes segment from around Major League Baseball. A little different now that we're heading into the postseason, and Cubs action has wrapped up as well. But we saw a lot of excitement in the American League, even on Sunday. That final day of the regular season, 4 teams in contention for the wild card positions. A lot of fun watching that play out. I've been leading the Shohei Ohtani fan train. He ended up with 46 home runs, 26 stolen bases, 100 runs batted in, and then on the mound, he was 9-2 with over 150 strikeouts. If he is not the American League MVP, he will have been robbed. Ohtani should be the face of the game. He pitches, he bats, he's good at both. He's even good on the base paths. Interesting note from the Cubs-Cards series this weekend. You may have seen this if you saw Saturday's game on Marquee. The Cardinals have 3 of the 6 oldest players in Major League Baseball. Adam Wainwright, Yadier Molina, and J.Hay Happ. And John Lester is not far behind. He ended the year in St. Louis. MLB postseason action getting underway tonight in Boston. Yankees at Red Sox with an 8:08 first pitch on ESPN. Winner moves on to play Tampa Bay on Thursday. Both teams 92-70. In fact, if you haven't been paying attention, the American League East had 4 teams with 90 wins. Tampa Bay, I think, actually had 100. Then you have Boston and New York at 92, and Toronto had 91 wins this year. Now, that division also had a 5th team, the Baltimore Orioles. They only had 52. So I guess perhaps it balances out. You had the feast, and then you had the famine with the O's. Over in the National League, the Cardinals in Los Angeles to play the Dodgers tomorrow night. That one-game playoff gets going at 8:10 Wednesday night on TBS. Winner advances to play San Francisco. Other matchups include the White Sox at Astros, Braves and Brewers. I really like the White Sox. I think they've got an incredible roster. I like Tony La Russa as a manager as well. I mean, how old is he? He's 76, 79, something like that. He's in his late 70s. Came back after many years on the sidelines, away from the game, and he's got this team going. It's fun to see. So I like the White Sox. I love so much about them. Haven't seen a whole lot of Tampa. I admit that, but I'm very high on the Sox. Also high on the Astros. I think the White Sox get by the Astros, and I think it's a White Sox-Giants World Series with San Fran getting another title, their 4th since 2010. Chime in with your thoughts on Twitter. Follow us at Bricks Bleachers. Offer up your thoughts on postseason or the Chicago Cubs. That is what this podcast is all about. And this is the first time in several years where we don't have Cubs postseason action to talk about. So we'll have updates moving forward. And spring training isn't that far away. 4 months will be here before you know it. If you don't already, subscribe so you never miss an episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, just to name a few. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. This is the Bricks and Bleachers Podcast.